Hello everyone, and welcome to another wire wrap video tutorial. My name is Jim McIntosh and I'm with the Wire Art Education Center. You can find us online at wirearteducation.com. This week's video is really kind of interesting. Now, over the last couple of years that I've been showing you how to make these very simple claw settings, these prong settings, they've all been kind of similar. The settings are all very similar. It's just different ways of using it. And today I have a really cool statement pendant that we're going to be making. It's a prong setting, so it's going to be familiar if you've made any of my prong set pieces. It's got 3 stones in it. And this is a great way to really showcase the stones that you have. So many people make these pieces that have so much wire on them that the stone gets lost. You spend a lot of money on high quality stones. Why cover them up with wire? That's my philosophy. I don't understand why people cover these things up. But the stones are the centerpiece. And this one shows you how to use 3 beautiful stones, and you can use 3 stones of your choosing to make a very elegant, big statement piece pendant. All right? You're going to love this one, I know it. So if you're ready, let's hop over to the bench. We're going to take a look at the tools, materials, and we're going to get an overview of the project as well. So let's get started. So this is what we're going to be making. Just a very three stone setting. Very simply done. It's kind of a lot of the things we've already been doing with these wiresmith claw settings is that we've just added these. We've got one central wire going through the whole thing. You can put a bail on here before you make these settings. You can slide some type of a bail in there. I just like to use it with just one of these, just simple cord. No setting, just use this top wire as the bail for this piece. So simple piece, very nice. I'm using 3 very similar stones. Go wild. You can go crazy with the shape too. It doesn't have to be this type of shape. You can make a nice pointed shape. You can do lots of different things with the shape of this, but this is the basic piece that we're going to be doing for this. So these are the tools that we're going to be using for this. Very basic tools. We've used them in all of our other pieces. A pair of WrapMaker pliers. You can find, and actually you can find all of the resources where you can get all of this stuff down in the directions below, the description below rather. So WrapMaker pliers. We're going to need something to cut the wire with, so we're going to have some wire cutters. These are just some very nice little flush cutters. To make the settings, to do the cut and wrap area, I always use a flat hand file. And I've got a short one. It's got a cutting edge on all 4 sides of it. So I go with that. Painter's tape and scissors to be able to get the painter's tape off of here. We're going to use this to hold the wire bundles together. Something to measure with. I've got this little tape measure. I've got my old tape measure. I've got a steel or a metal tape measure. This one is both in metric and in inches, so I would get one that does both because we're going to be using both measurements. Something else that I think is needed is, for this, we're going to be using some cotton swabs and some nail polish remover to get rid of and to pull off some of our the marks that we put in there with a permanent marker. Speaking of permanent markers, we're going to be using a fine tip permanent marker to lay everything out with. You're going to need also, I'm going to be using, and this is optional, this piece here is my bench block and my rawhide mallet. Optional, but I use these in order to set a lot of the settings I've done. And then also, this too is optional, but I think it's essential, is this is my flex shaft, and I've got inserted in here It's a diamond, it's a silicone diamond disc. It's a cutting and polishing disc. The information for that is down in the description below as well. And that should be everything. The materials for this are also very simple. We've got 18 gauge half round wire and 18 gauge square wire. And that's going to make up a bulk of the materials that we're going to use, as well as 3 cabochons that we'll be using. That's it. So first I want to show you the layout of this. Before we really get into the wire and everything, I'm going to set my wire aside right quick. So the layout is very basic. As you saw in the sample, we've got our large stone here on the left, and then we're going to have a smaller stone there. And then I've got this oval shape, this teardrop, almost a teardrop shaped stone that I'm going to put here. Now I want my groupings to be kind of similar. If you have 2 oval shaped stones and you want to set them like this, that's great. But you have to remember that the top of this large one and the top of the smaller one on the right, that those are going to be even and level with one another, okay? So however you lay this out or set this up, that's up to you. But I just wanted to point that out. The other thing I want to point out is the spacing between this stone and this stone. It's going to be about a 5 millimeter space. That's what we're going to be measuring out when we do the setting for this right side. We're going to actually do about a 5 millimeters between the bottom of this stone and the top of that one, okay? And that'll all make sense. I just wanted to show you how we were laying these out. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our stone aside, and we're going to start with our wire. Now I've got a 10-inch piece of 18 gauge square dead soft wire. Remember, I always use dead soft. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten my wire out. I want to do it just relatively straight. We're not looking for perfectly straight. And then we're going to take our measuring device and we're going to mark the center. So the center of a 10-inch piece would be 5 inches. So we'll take this and we're going to make a mark. This is the center, and everything is going to be laid out from our center mark, okay? Now from the center we're going to make 2 more marks, and I want to measure 2 inches, so an inch to the left of that center mark and an inch to the right of that center mark. That's going to be the tops of the stones, the left stone and the right stone. So this will be the top of our left stone, and this will be the top of our right stone. This is only for laying things out. Now, we're going to be putting a lot of marks on this wire. To keep everything straight, as we're going to start on the left side first, we'll cut and lay that out and put all of our settings there. And then we're going to go to the right side. But we're going to be putting a lot of marks on here. So just so you don't get confused, what I would do is I would get some nail polish remover. This is great for taking these permanent marker markings that we put on here. I just put a little bit of this on a Q-tip, and I just wipe out the marks that I don't want that kind of confuse me. And I'll show you that in just a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of this in the cap. I don't need a whole lot, just a tiny bit. I'm going to set that aside for now. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to take my left stone. Remember, we laid these out. This was the left one. And that mark that we just made that's an inch from the center, I'm going to line that up here on here. This is the easy way. You could measure the length of the stone and make all these marks on there. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to actually mark the bottom of the stone. So I have a mark now at the top, and at the bottom of the stone. And we're going to measure it. Now I know this is probably about a 40 millimeter stone, yeah. So we've made a mark about 40 millimeters apart. So I'm going to then mark the center. This is the center of the stone. That would be 20 millimeters. Okay, let me show you what we're doing. So this is the layout of my stone. Top of the stone, bottom of the stone, center of the stone. Okay? We're going to get rid of some of these marks in just a minute. We had 2 more marks to make. We're going to mark out the cut and wrap area. Now, we're using a rather large stone, and I usually like to make my cut and wraps about a 1/2 inch long, especially for big stones like this. So that's what we're going to do. So center of the stone mark is right there. We're going to line 1/4 of an inch up with that center mark, and then we're going to go to the left of it 1/4 of an inch, and the right of it 1/4 of an inch. Now, just so you don't get confused, we're going to take our cotton bud, our cotton swab here, and we're going to get rid of the top mark from the stone, clean that up, and the bottom mark of the stone. That cuts out our confusion. That's just our cut and wrap area that we've got there. So that just kind of helps us know where we're at. You don't have to do that. I do it because I'll get very confused very easily, very quickly. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to cut some wire for the setting. So let's set that guy aside for just a second. We're going to cut 2 prong pieces of prong. That doesn't make any sense, does it? We're going to cut 2 prong wires 3 inches long. So here's one, and here's the second one. Both of these are going to be about 3 inches long. Okay, so there's our prongs. And the next thing we're going to, let me set my wire aside here right quick. What we want to do is we want to straighten these guys out too. Here's the other one. Okay. Now set them side by side, square them up so that they're flat. They're level on one end. And we're going to mark the centers. So I'm going to line this up. I'm going to make a mark across both of these wires. We said they were 3 inches long. The center of it is 1.5 inches. So right here at 1.5 inches, we're just going to mark both of those wires. See, just like that. What we want to do now is we want to line, we're going to add those to this main wire. Okay? We're going to take these center marks on the prongs and put them on the center mark of that cut and wrap area that we had. We're going to use some painter's tape. So take this center wire and hold it, and then take the left wire, and I just want you to line up the center marks. So notice this is the center mark on the prong wire with the center mark on our main wire. We'll do the same thing on the other one. We'll take that center mark that we just made, and again, these are just about as close and as approximate as we can get. Now I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape, and I'm going to line it up. Make sure you line it up outside of that cut and wrap area. That's what we've got right there. And I'm just going to bring that around and stick it to itself. Now I use painter's tape because it doesn't really leave a lot of residue on here, and that's what we want to do. We don't want a lot of residue left on the tape, left on the wire. So I'm going to take another one. I'm going to put it just outside our measured cut and wrap area, and there. So we've got 2 flags. They're outside our cut and wrap area right here. And what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and file that away. Now if you've watched any of my videos, we're just going to take a flat hand file, and it's got a serration on all 4 sides of it, so all 4 sides of the file can be used. We're going to use the narrow side because it's going to fit within that cut and wrap area. Now if you're confused as to how wide this is, just extend your cut and wrap wire or your cut and wrap marks that are on the center wire that we only put on one wire, you can extend those out to those prong wires just so that you can see what's going on. But what we're going to do is I always like to start here on the left, and I'm going to take the edge of the file. So notice I have it here at an angle, so I get just that edge, and I make a couple of passes over that. So I've got this nice bright area here. That's kind of just gives it a good shoulder. And then just continue to file. And we're not filing a whole lot away. We only want to take maybe a ½ millimeter off. The more that you remove, that could weaken this. So if you cut half of this wire away, you could weaken the prongs, and that's something we don't want. So we're just going to make a couple of passes till we get to the other side. And then on the other side I do the same thing. I kind of take the edge and I go across a couple of times to get a good edge, and then I'm going to keep filing. The other thing I like to do is I like to turn it around, so I get just do a couple of just a pass down the whole length of this cut and wrap area, just so that I make sure I don't have like a slanted edge on there. Sometimes as you're filing, you can get kind of this weird edge. So there. So we're going to set this. Just use a sanding block to get it up off of my workbench. So this is their cut and wrap area, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of wrap wire. I'm going to use about a 6-inch piece of wrap wire. This is 18 gauge half round wire, and I've got my WrapMaker pliers for this job, and I'm going to put my WrapMakers where I want to start my wrap, and we're going to then insert one end in between the jaws here, and we're going to start our wrap. So here's one wrap. We're just going to do about 4 or 5 wraps and then set it. You set it by squeezing the wrap. Okay, so switch hands here and make sure I have a good tight wrap. You want to make sure you have a good secure tight wrap on here, and I like to hold it with my WrapMakers also as I'm going down. It gives you more leverage to be able to make a good tight wrap. That's one of the other good things about these pliers, is the fact that they can give you that leverage. You can hold on to it. It's holding the bundles flat, and then you can give it a good pull to get these nice and flat without bunching them up. And that's a problem some people have with wire wrapping, making these wraps, is that they pull too hard. It causes them to bunch up, and that's the cool thing about these WrapMakers, is they keep everything flat as you're applying some of that pressure. So I had just enough wire on there, so I'm going to trim off my excess. I always trim about half the width of the bundle. I'm going to push that guy down, and the same thing over here. Just got a tiny little bit here that we got to there. And be sure that you save your scraps, these sterling silver that I'm using. The other thing I like to do is, just to make sure I've got a good set, is I take my bench block. This is optional. You do not have to do this. But I put the cut side against the bench block, and then I'm going to use a rawhide mallet, and I'm going to give it just a few taps. I do that because it does a couple of things. Technically it hardens the metal just a little bit, but it also makes sure that I got a good firm setting. So you can take this off the tape. So remove your tape, and we're going to bring our prongs out to a 45-degree angle. So make sure you're at have your cut side facing you, and bring these guys out to about a 45-degree angle from the center wire. This one's not cooperating. I can't get my finger in there to pull. There we go. And I always like a nice bend here, a nice square bend on either of these. So I try to get as close to the wrap as I can with that bend. Same thing down here. We're going to flip it around, and we're just going to bring each of those out. See how it kind of just does this curve? I like to pull that curve out by just working the pliers in as down to the bottom as I can, close to the wrap, and getting it straightened out. And the same thing over here. Now, we need to put the setting. We need to make sure we figure out where we want everything to be at and make our prongs. So let me kind of bring this in. So I take a piece of painter's tape. I'm going to flip this over. This is the cut side, so I'm going to go to the side that's not cut. Now the cut side is going to be up against the stone. Put a piece of painter's tape across the wrap. That helps me see where the center is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to center the prong setting on the stone to where it's about the center. And once I get it there, I'm going to stick the tape to the stone. And yeah, I didn't get it quite centered. Yeah, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, where I can eyeball the center, but I'm off just ever so slightly. There we go. I think that's about the center. Yes, it is. Okay, very good. Okay, so I've got this centered, so now I can flip it over, and I can take my fine tip permanent marker, and I can mark where I want the prongs to come out. You may need to adjust this. See, now notice these are in closer than these are, so I'm going to bring these guys in just a little bit so everybody's even, and then I'm just going to mark each prong where it comes out from the stone. Now we're just marking the prongs, and one more. Once you get a mark on all four of those prongs, you can take the tape off the stone. Good thing about this whole taping the stone to the setting, that actually came from one of my YouTube viewers. It was a great idea. I really appreciate it. And you guys do have some great ideas, so make sure you put your ideas down in the comments. It's very helpful. It not only helps me, but it also helps other people as well. So these marks that we've made here, where we're going to make our bends that are going to start where we go over. So this flat side is where the bottom of the stone is. So we're going to take each one of those. I've got the cut side facing me, and I'm going to bend each of these prongs toward me. So that one, and then we're going to go down here and do this one, and then the other side, do that one, and we will do this last one. There we go. So now all four prongs are facing us. Let me show you from the side view here. So you see how this is the side view. So I should be able to set my stone in the setting, and I shouldn't really, let's see, I've got a few, I want to show you a few things. Notice how this bend is in the wrong place, but this one on the opposite side of it is not. This setting is, this bend is good. This bend, not so much. So what I want to do is I need to make this one kind of come out just a little bit. So I kind of push this down and then remake the bend. And now that should sit correctly on that side. And I need to do the same thing. I've got this one's good. This one, not so good. So again, I'm going to kind of go, this is how I want to, so I'm going to squeeze the bend with the extra space that I want, and then I'm going to remake the bend in that. And I want to make sure I get everything nice and straightened out and flattened out. Okay, so the stone should now sit flat in my setting. So just like that. Oops. Good job, Jim. Gravity. Okay, see, so it all should sit nice and flat. So once I get it nice and flat, I'm going to take these prongs and I'm going to just push each prong over the stone. There. So it should hold our stone in. They should all be flat. If they are not flat or as flat as you would like them, you need to go back and do a little bit of additional cleanup on them. So now just cut some of this extra prong wire away. Don't cut too deep. These aren't precise, so just a few cuts to get off some of that excess. And notice I'm kind of putting my thumb on the ends so they don't go swinging out at people. So this is our prong setting so far. We want to do some cleanup. So the first thing we want to do is we want to cut these prongs to where they are just above the stone. And we want to cut about that much. This is a shallow stone, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to kind of look at the two sides, and I'm going to kind of cut that one. Okay, those are even and level. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to just cut off. That's about as much, and one more. It's better when you're trimming to cut off too little than too much. I say it all the time. You can't add wire, you can only remove wire. So now that you've got your prongs cut, you can open them back up. And what we're going to do is, for now, normally what I would do is I would normally clean up all of the prongs as I go. But we're setting 3 stones. So I'm going to actually do all of that at the same time. And I'll show you what I'm doing, what I mean by that. If you've watched any of these videos where I do these claw settings, these prong settings, I usually take my Dremel tool, my rotary tool, and I clean these up. We're going to do that after we set the other side. So we've got the left side done. We need to start working here on the right side. So we're going to start with our next stone, this one right here. Let's do that. This stone, as you recall, sits differently. It's not going to be lengthways, it's going to go across. So this is that other, here's our center mark, remember? This is the other mark, it's 1 inch from this center. That's going to be the top of this stone, and it's going to sit sideways like this on there. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to measure the stone, so this is the length of our stone. And let's take a look and see where we are. So this one is 20 millimeters. Okay, it's about 20, almost 21. We're going to call it a 20. And we're going to say the center's just around 10 millimeters. Now, realize that 20 millimeters is a half inch. That's a half inch. We're not going to make the same cut and wrap area. This is kind of a good rule to think about when making these cut and wrap areas. You want to make it approximately the width of this, half the width of the stone. So we have a half inch. We're going to make a cut and wrap area that is 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to line up the 1/8 of an inch with that center mark. As soon as I get it centered here, so that's 1/8, and we're going to go 1/8 to the left and 1/8 to the right. That's our cut and wrap area. It's about 1/4 of an inch in length. We're going to then take our Q-tip, and we're going to get a little bit of this on here, and we're going to remove the top and the bottom of the stone. I like to use the side I didn't soak to kind of clean up the excess here. So this just leaves us with that cut and wrap area. And look, I just tried to knock off part of that cut and wrap area, the top mark. So there we go. So again, we're going to do the same thing with this one. Cut 2 prongs. Grab my prong wire here. And these we're going to cut 2 inches long. We don't need quite as much, so we're going to cut 2 of these. Bring this into frame here. So I'm going to cut 2 prongs. Here's one of them at 2 inches. Here's the other one at 2 inches. Whoa. See what happens when you don't hold on to the wire when you're cutting? It shoots across the room. Okay. So straighten your wire out. It's got a slight curve to it, so just give your wire just a nice straighten out. Get as straight as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect. That one and this one. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set them next to one another. It's nice and squared up. And we're going to mark the centers of these. That'll be 1 inch, so we're going to make a 1 inch mark across both of them. Okay, and that will be the center of that one. So what we want to do is we want to put one of these. I'm going to line up the center mark to the right. This is the right prong, so I got my center marks all lined up, and then we're going to do the same thing here on the left. We're going to get the center mark all lined up. And once you do, you take your painter's tape and you put it on the outside of your cut and wrap area. You make another flag. Nice good taped flag. There's one. And we'll do the same thing over here. And I like to get it as close to the cut area that I'm going to cut away. This helps keep the center of it tight and inside of each other, so that as you're cutting, everything doesn't kind of spread open. So we like to just kind of keep it that way. Now what we can do is we are ready for this. Now again, we're going to use the edge. We're going to make a couple of passes with the edge, and then we're going to cut across all 3. And again, we'll cut about a 1/2 millimeter. Cut this. I'm going to make that little cut area on the edge on this side. There we go. Now we should just go ahead and make a couple of passes. And then I always flip it around. Okay. That should be ready. Now we just need to cut off a piece of half round. I'm going to cut about a 4-inch piece this time. We don't need quite as much because this is not as big of a cut and wrap area. And I've got my, WrapMaker pliers here, and this is where I want to start it. So I'm going to put it there. Insert the wrap wire, and then begin doing your wraps. I'm going to just wrap this small area. This is wrap number 4, 5. You know what? I'm just going to keep going, because this is not going to be. One more. There we go. That should do it. And set it by squeezing, making sure you got a good tight wrap. Cut off your excess, about half the width of the bundle. There's that one, and there's that one. Okay. And as usual, I like to get out my bench block. Got the cut side down again. I'm just hammering this to firm everything up. Okay. That's done, and we can remove our tape. And we're going to do the same thing. Again, we're going to mark our prongs. Each prong's going to get marked, and we're going to then set those prongs, make the prongs. So we're really just doing the same thing we did here on this big stone. We're just going to do it on a smaller scale here on this other side. So out 45 degrees. I like to make sure I got them good and firm. Now these are going to have to go out just a little bit more because we're setting this. This is getting set length. Whoops, wrong stone. Where'd my stone go? There it is, right in front of me. See, we're gonna set it out like this. So these need to be just out just a little bit further. So this isn't quite 45 degrees. It's actually further than that. It's much wider. So the same thing here. I like to get in here and good square prong, nice and square. When you do this, the whole point of actually getting these prongs tight up against this wrap is that this bend here will actually make this to be even stronger of a setting. These prongs won't move. That's why we put the cut and wrap area in there, so that the prongs stay put. And that's why we try to get a good bend here as close to this as we can, because the more of this space we take out in making those bends, so that's nice and tight up against that wrap, the firmer these prongs are going to be. Alright, so we're going to take another piece of painter tape. That one's too big. Let me grab a small. I'm going to use a narrow one this time because that is a very narrow setting that we made. So I'm going to use a thin piece that's about the width of this. So here's my cut ends are out facing me, so we're going to go to the back, the opposite side of that, and we're going to take our stone, and remember our stone is going to go lengthwise this time, and there, we got it stuck, and I didn't center it, so we're going to have to just do a little bit of maneuvering here to get this centered on here right. I think that's about center. And we need to move our prongs just a little bit. That should be good. So take our fine tip permanent marker. We're going to mark each of these prongs. Now you can make this piece with just 2 stones. You don't have to do 3 stones like I'm doing. You can just duplicate this this large stone to the other side. You know, you can just make 2 large stones. That works out really well as also. So just keep that in mind as well. So we're now going to bend these prongs. And we're going to bend them toward the middle. So we got a nice squared up. That one's squared up. And then these 2. You're setting these stones lengthwise as opposed to the height wise. It's a little more difficult, but it is possible. Okay, so let's take a look at our setting here. Okay, looks like we got these where we want them. So we're just going to push them up over the stone a bit. Just like you see, what we're doing is repeating pretty much the same steps as we did. Now we're going to trim them shorter. I trim them shorter so I can get a better look at them. So that they're not sitting right on, up in the middle. Sometimes these prongs you can get too many wires in the middle and you can't really see what's happening. So I like to trim them just a little bit before I give them a good final set. Okay. Alright. Make sure I'm... Okay, so we're going to go just above. Yep, that's good. And number 3. One more. Now, normally at this point, what would we do? We would open the prongs, wouldn't we? And we would take the stone out to get ready to do the fixing of the prongs here. But we're going to wait just 1 second. What we want to do now is we want to measure. Remember I said between that stone and this stone we were going to have a space of 5 millimeters. 5 millimeters, okay? We want to put that 5 millimeters in right now. So, on that center wire, I want to line up my stone, the bottom of this stone, with the 5 millimeter, and then I want to take my fine tip permanent marker and I want to mark 5 millimeters. Okay, that's the top of this next stone. So you can do that. You can set your stone on here, and the top of the stone is there at 5 millimeters. The bottom of the stone is down here. Let me do this. Let me line everything up properly here. Okay, so we've got that one, and all we want to do is we want to mark, there's the bottom of our stone. That's the length of the stone. That's going to help us. So before we move on any further, let's remove this stone, because we are going to have to kind of fix these prongs on each one of these. We're going to have to clean them up and shape them so that they look good, because these have got a real blunt end that doesn't feel very good. We want to smooth these out. So now that we've got, this is the length of our stone, of our final stone. See? Let me show you. See, so that's the length of our stone. So what we want to do is we want to measure it again. So our stone is 30 millimeters. Half of that would be at 15 millimeters. Okay, and this stone in inches is about, it's about 1.25 inches. A ½ inch would be too long. Well, a ½ inch would actually work. Let's do that. Let's see what a ½ inch would look like on here. That would be a ½ inch. That should work with this shape of a stone. So what we'll do is we'll just do our ½ inch there. And again, we've got too many marks on here, so what we want to do is we want to get just a little bit more of that. We're going to remove a couple of these marks so that we don't get too confused. There's that one, and then let's get rid of our bottom one. There, that cleans it up very nicely. And it's also kind of good to take these marks off too as you go, because you don't want to have to worry about them being seen. So we're done with our, I actually have one more mark we have to get rid of. So just hold on to your little bit of your fingernail polish remover. So that's there. What we want to do is we want to get our prongs. So we're going to cut 2 more prongs. These 2 can also be 2 inches. So we're going to cut these 2 at 2 inches in length. So here is 1. And here is number 2. Okay. I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to, well, let's straighten them out there, kind of curved, just a little bit. Okay. And that's a good thing about this dead soft wires. It really is flexible and can move pretty well. So that makes it much easier to work with. Alright, let's line these guys up and square them up. Okay, get them lined up at 0, so we're going to mark the center at 1 inch. There we go. Now let's go ahead and put these on the outside of our main wires here. So we're going to take and line up that center mark. Where'd our center mark go? There he is. So we got one on the right, and let's do the one on the left. And be sure, you've got another prong setting just above this one. And I'm going underneath the setting, so just try and get it underneath it as best you can. And then we're going to put our tape here. We're going to tape all 3 of these together. So that's flag number 1. And there's flag number 2. So there's our cut and wrap area. And let me show you what this will look like on the stone, this cut and wrap area. See, it's going to sit nice and neatly on the center of this. Okay? So, once again, let's take, and we will take our file, and we're going to file this. So we'll start off at the edge. Here I'm at the right side, so I'm going to get on the edge and I'm going to just cut that shoulder into it and finish up the file area. Okay, and we'll swing this guy around and we'll do the other side just to kind of make sure we're level. There we go. And now we're going to cut about a 6-inch piece. Since we did a 1/2 inch length, we're going to cut another 6-inch piece of wire. 6 or 7-ish. I'm going to do a 7 this time, 7 inches. And we're going to line up our WrapMaker pliers. You just start making your wraps. This is a little bit larger, so I am going to stop and I'm going to fix this first one. I didn't quite get a good tight wrap. There we go. Okay, and continue. Okay, so all we have to do now is just cut off the excess. We finish making that wrap. So that's one, and here let's do the other side. Okay, and we'll just knock these guys down just a little bit just to make sure they're all even with the rest of the wrap. Take our tape off. There we go. We've made 3 settings. And we're going to do that 45-degree angle. So pull these guys out to about a 45. This one. Okay, so we've got these out at 45-degree angle. Here's the cut ends that we have. I'm going to take my tape, put it across the uncut side of this. That's going to be the side that faces down. We want to center this on the stone. And kind of eyeball it at first. There. Nope, I'm way off. I can already tell you that. Very good. Okay, so that's what your prongs are going to look like. Okay, so you want to just make sure it doesn't twist on you. And we're going to take our fine tip permanent marker. We're going to mark each of the prongs. We can remove our stone. And we're going to make our bends. So we'll bend each of these prongs. There's one. Okay, now that our prongs are bent, we should be able to put our stone in. You want to check it, make sure you've got it, everything in the right place, everything's centered. All of these sit flush, flat rather. If they do, you can bend each one up over the stone. And then trim it. Remember, this is just a trim. Alright, and we want to do a kind of a final cut on these. You just want them to be just above the stone. And then this final one, I want it to be about the same height as the one that you just did. Okay. So that ought to be good, so we can get rid of all of our cuts. And now, you notice we've got this excess wire coming out the bottom. What I like to do is let me remove this stone. Well, let me explain it with the stone in. You can use this as a decoration to kind of bend it up over the stone. When you're done, you can bend it and make a nice design on here. I've got a couple of videos. I'll put them up in the cards or down below in the comments below, or the description below rather, of a tutorial that shows me using some of this wire to make these decorative pieces on the front of the stone. For this particular one, I love the stone, so I'm not going to do that. I wanted this to be kind of a very simple looking piece, because I love this stone. Really, I think is gorgeous. All three of these are this turquoise. So I'm going to remove the stone, and this excess wire, what I'm going to do is I am going to bend it back over the setting, and I'm going to push it against the setting so it's nice and flush up against there, and I'm going to trim it about 1/4 of an inch, but right there. And when I trim the prongs and clean the prongs up, I'm also going to straighten this out too. I'm going to cut it so that it has a nice curve to it so that you don't feel it. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. This is where the big stone was, as you recall. You can do the same thing. You can take this and you can use it as a decorative piece. I am going to not do that on this particular one. I am going to bend it back over it, make sure it's nice and squashed down, and then trim it off. So I've trimmed it short like that. Now what we want to do is we're going to use our rotary tool. And in my rotary tool, let me get it all situated here, I have this silicone rubber diamond polishing wheel. And this will cut and polish as you go. And what I want to do is I want to put a curve to the ends of these prongs. So each prong, I want it to have, it's got a square shape now. I want it to have kind of a rounded shape. So I'm going to do that with this. You can do this with a flat file. Let's see if I've got my flat file handy. Here we go. This is my flat needle file. You can use this to add that shape just by going over it and putting that curve in there. Okay, that takes a little bit of time to do. That's why I use this polishing wheel, because it's a lot faster. These are handy. So let me show you what I'm doing. Okay, so I've done all 4 of these prongs, and all I've done is I've just added this gentle curve to it and took some of that tip out of it so that it's not so scratchy. And I'm going to do the same thing back here on this one as well. And then I'm going to go to the rest of these. I'm going to go ahead and cut and polish each of those. And I'm going to do all of that off camera. You know, it gets really boring, so you're not going to enjoy any of that. So let me finish this up, and I'll show you what we have. Okay, so we've got all of these prongs cut and they're polished really good, and it's difficult to see what you've done as far as on camera is concerned. You can see it when you're really doing it in real life, but all we've done is we've just added some shape to each of these prongs. They just all curve. I've taken kind of the scratchy tips off of them so they're not so scratchy, as well as notice I've cut this down. Now hopefully you can see it. I've added that shape to it. I've cut this so that it doesn't scratch. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and we can set our stones. So setting them, just put them back into the settings, and then you're going to take your WrapMaker pliers and you're going to put one jaw at the bottom and then the other one, and you're just going to kind of give it a push over the stone, and be very, very careful. You do not want it to slip off of that prong and chip your stone, so please, please, please be careful. Same thing over here. We're doing this in opposite, so I started at the bottom and I'm going to do the opposite prong. So I'll put my pliers there. I'm just going to push it over. I'm going to do the same thing with all of the prongs that are on here. So here I've got this just about set here. And I got the last one to set. So there. So I've got all 4 of my prongs in. It looks like I've got them kind of wonky. Hold on. Gotta have to kind of even them out a bit. Okay. Okay, this one's kind of a little wonky as well. Notice that technical term I use, wonky. There you go. Alright, I think I got it. So I'm just going to do the same thing with all these other ones. I'm just going to set my stones in these other settings the same exact way. So I'm going to do these all off camera so you're not bored watching me do it. And then I'll show you what we've got, and we'll finish it up in just a minute. Okay, so we've got all of them done. So here we have this side. Got an extra piece of tape on me. Alright. So we've got all 3 of these set. Here's this side, and here's this side. So all we have left is the bail. And the bail is so easy to do. That's why we left our center mark on there. Now, you can use just about anything to make this. I like to start with the big end of a ring mandrel. I've also used, let's say I've got a tin here. This is a tin of my Renaissance wax. This might work as well. It might be big enough. We can kind of just give it so it's not going to be quite what we want. So what I want to do is I want to take and I want to center it on here, and I just want to bring the sides around till we can't get any more. And then I'm just going to kind of coax it the rest of the way with my fingers. So this is what we've got. And we'll just kind of straighten things out a bit, and this is going to have to be just slightly wider so that we've got everything kind of centered on there. And that is all she wrote. And I want to make sure that this and this are even, so notice they're not, so I'm going to just kind of straighten some of this up. And we're doing all of this with our fingertips, not using specialized tools, because this is dead soft wire, you recall. So I'm just playing with it till I get it even. And I straighten everything out. And that is about it. So now what I want to do is I want this to be a nice firm bail. I want that wire to be nice and firm. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, I'm going to put this curve, I've got my stones off of my bench block. I'm going to take this and my mallet and I'm going to hit it. I'm going to tap that wire with my mallet. I'm going to add a little bit of pressure to it, not a whole lot, but I want enough to where I'm work hardening this wire so that nothing moves out of shape. So it keeps its shape. And as long as you keep your stones off of the metal, you're pretty much not going to hit it. You're going to do pretty good about not hitting it. So now that we've got, see now it's springy. Now it should spring, because you look, watch, I mean, boing, boing, boing. See, it's kind of springy. That's what you want. You want it to be kind of springy. So we're just hitting that enough. Now, I still have my little mark there. I still have a little bit of this. Let me dip it in there right quick. And I'm just going to quickly remove that last mark. And I'm going to want to polish this. I'm going to want to take and put my buffing wheel on and just polish this top part up a bit. But that's something that everybody's got different techniques that they like to use to polish these things up. I personally just like to use a little buff and a little bit of jeweler's rouge and do that. So that's all that's left. That's all you got. This is our finished product. Wasn't that a fun project? There's so many things you can do with that. The shapes and the stones that you can use. It really gives you a lot of really good practice too on making those settings. I'm telling you, don't cover up your stones with all of that wire. Keep it simple. Make an elegant piece. I hope you guys enjoyed this because I really enjoyed it myself. The next video is also going to highlight another interesting way of making jewelry. And if you haven't taken a look at all of the different videos on my channel, go back, take a look at my channel, take a look at all of the pieces that we've made. We've made some really cool, awesome pieces. So I'm glad you came by. Again, my name is Jim McIntosh. And please remember, and I say it every single project, practice, practice, practice.